What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Come with me if you want to live.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
The Force will be with you, always.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and today I am joined by, once again, friend of the show and fellow nerd, Ria Corrigan. Ria, how are you doing? You okay?
I am good, thank you. As always, I'm excited to be here. I feel like this chat's going to be on par with our Mike Flanagan TV show chat. So
yes, that's it. So you've done all about, we did all about Mike, because everybody wants to be like Mike.
I was wondering if you were going to sing that. I was like, he doesn't, I will.
So we've done that. That was fantastic. And now we're going to be talking about some more films, actually. We're going to be talking about This Is Then and Again. And so we're going to be talking about, from 1951, The Thing from Another World. And then, not quite a remake, because we'll talk about that, but then the 1982, the John Carpenter version, The Thing. And neither of us will talk about the 2011 version because it was crap. But we'll stick to that. So 1951 and 1982. You'll probably see a bias as to which one we're going to talk about, but we'll see. But before we really get into details, Ria.
Yes.
The Thing and sort of The Thing from Another World. Had you seen the 1951 version before this?
Yes, I
had.
had.
Okay.
Yes. I have a confession. I have not rewatched it for this because I didn't want to, but I remember quite a bit about it. So I have not rewatched it. I have watched the 1951 version because I'm a big fan of things like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So every iteration of it, even the shit ones, I watch and enjoy and consume. And I'll be like, I will watch anything to do with Body Snatchers. And so I watched The Thing a very long time ago. It's one of my all-time favorite films, and did not know it was based. Well, it's not a remake as such, but obviously then there's also the novel,
yes,
all of that sort of stuff. So didn't know that. So found out about it. Went, that sounds like Body Snatchers, because I would have been like, why on earth would I watch this version? Because The Thing is one of the best films ever. So yeah, and so then went and watched it, and quite recently, like within like. I was about to say quite recently, forgetting how old I am. Within the last 20 years, I watched it. I was about to say like within the last 10 years. It's like, no, it was quite a long time ago that you actually watched it. So I say I didn't rewatch it. That's not strictly true. I had it on.
Yeah.
I didn't pay attention.
Yeah,
this is like my confession.
No.
Because I was like, I'm just going to wing it and say I didn't watch it. Whereas the reality was, I put it on and was sort of like, oh yeah, I'm just sort of derping and doing other things. That's not to say it's bad. But just my interest is low.
It's interesting because for this podcast for Stories at Time and Space, Julian and I did a block of 50s sci-fi. And we didn't do a Thing from Another World, but we did a lot When Worlds Collide, and it came from Beyond the Stars.
Yeah, nice.
All those kinds of films, and there's some great ones in there. But they do all. There's a very
one.
Yeah. There's very much like a 50s sci-fi feel, and this, The Thing from Another World definitely falls into that category of sort of like. Group of blokes, usually with one or two women, and then they basically just beat the thing at the end, and that's it. Like, and that sort of is really simple, but like there's so little character building or anything else beyond the really perfunctory sort of like, in the Thing from the World, like you get the captain who is in love and has this sort of like a bit of a tit for tat relationship with this sort of like strong-willed woman who works as with the scientists in the Arctic base, and then the only other one that seems to have a personality is the newspaper guy, who's sort of like that proper like 50s like, I'm a newspaper man, I talk fast and I report stories, here's the facts, and you're just like, all right, yeah.
and that's the thing, like that is pretty much his entire character.
Oh, yes, totally. Like there's nothing else to it.
There's nothing else to it. and I didn't remember that. So put it on. I was like, I'm going to watch it.
Yeah.
So, this is so bad. They put it on whilst I was working and was like, this will probably distract me from my work. How terrible. I'll watch it later in the day. And it did not do that. And I was really surprised because my memory of it wasn't that. Again, I wouldn't say it's bad, but my memory of it wasn't that bad. Like I definitely, first time I watched it, sat down and watched it and wasn't distracted.
Yeah.
And I was surprised at how little I cared this time.
Yeah, it's not, you're right, it's not bad in comparison to other 50s sci-fi films. Like it stands apart, it stands shoulder to shoulder with them in much respects. But like I say, when you sit down and watch it, it's so thin. If anything, you get sort of like, when it's a problem when I am critiquing whilst watching what people are wearing. When I'm like, this is supposed to be in the Antarctic, and the guy's basically wearing sort of like a Mac. Like the newspaper man's running around in what is tantamount to like a rain Mac and a like a woolly hat. And they're all a bit like, oh, chilly, or it's lost a finger out there. And you're like, yeah, because you're wearing like a Burberry Mac, you prat. Like you wear, and then you watch the 1982 one and they're all sort of like proper kitted out. And you're like, yeah, that's what you should be wearing. Like, you don't deserve to live. You're an idiot.
What makes me laugh about that so much, and I really hope I'm not misremembering, but I'm sure at one point, don't they cover it with an electric blanket?
Yeah.
So they know it's cold and they know they need hot things. Yeah. They know they need warm things. And yet it's like, I've got fingerless gloves.
Yeah. Well, the weird thing is there's a great scene in it when they do find the ice thing. So they get to the Antarctic. I
was like, yes, focusing.
Yeah, there are certain scenes.
And when you consider when it was made.
Oh yeah, it looks good. Like there's some scenes that look really good. When they find the spaceship and it's flash frozen in the thing. I like all that, and it's melting then frozen into ice because it's sort of like because of the heat and stuff, and all that's kind of cool. And then they form the circle around it so you can see how big it is. And that's there's some great
really
images.
Good.
Yeah, there's some really cool images and stuff like that. Some really well thought out. But then it just pan back, and you've got like they're about to blow it up. They're about to use the thermite charge, and one of them is wearing like a massive parka. And then another one's wearing like a massive parka. Right? They're like extras. They're the professors wearing these big coats. And then the military guys have got these like big gloves on and like these big things around their heads. And then you've got like the main professor and the newspaper man. And the main professor is basically wearing like just a bobble hat and a coat. And then the newspaper man's like just wearing a rain mac. And I'm just like, clearly no one likes this because he's wearing like normal suit and shoes underneath as well. So I'm like, no one clearly likes this guy because everyone's going, no, fuck him. He don't live in a Mac.
Didn't get a coat.
Yeah, it's his own fault. Like, he knew where we were going, pillock.
What do you think? Do you think it just was like, when making it, they said to the costume designer, they're just like, we want him to stand out. We don't want him to be like, we want the audience to recognize him from all of the other people, because there's quite a few scientists that go out. Yes. And I was like, I don't know who all these people are. It's very confusing. They're quite interchangeable. So I do feel like they was like, we need people to recognize who it is. So just don't put him in any appropriate costumes so he really stands out.
Oh, I honestly think that you're right. I think there was a costume. There was basically like there was like 4 costume racks. And there was like women, anything that covers all. And then there's scientists, and that has like blazers and check shirts, glasses, and that sort of thing in it. And then there's military, and they're all like, oh, uniforms. There you go. Here's your leather jacket and all your bits and pieces. And then they were like, we have a newspaper reporter. Well, we did another film set in sunny Las Vegas, or sunny Los Angeles. Here's what he can wear. And you're like, oh, okay, fair enough. Yeah, I don't understand the costuming at all for the newspaper reporter.
And it's so
blatant.
The fact that there's a journalist there anyway is really weird. I find it really weird that he's just like, I like that we just got straight into it. He's just like, I need a new story. Obviously, paraphrasing. I need a new story. I'm going to go to Alaska. It's Alaska, isn't it? Yeah,
it is. Yeah,
and I'm just going to go to Alaska and see what's happening.
Yeah.
I mean, in general, nothing's happening there. I don't know what sort of story you thought you were going to get.
Yeah, he walks into like a bar, doesn't he? And all the military guys are there, and he has that. Although it's a 50s film, there's two actors in this that like have almost that like 30s cadence of talking. I think that 30s, 40s are sort of like very quick, not almost like banter, but like not, it's like repartee, but like without the emotion. So like he comes in and he's like, "Hello guys, any news? Do we have a story?" And it's almost like they always want to go, "Who are you?" So yeah, he turns up, and then one of them, the military, are just like, "Well, there is this general who is crazy, so we can go talk to him."
That'll be fun. What a great story.
Yeah, and so they end up just flying down to this to that. They get called down. The scientists say, "Oh, can you come down and see this? We found this thing, and we want you to fly us out there." So they fly down, and the moment they find out what it is. He's like, "Well, it's the story of the century. I must tell the world." And they're like, "No, you can't do that." And
that's
they're like,
the thing, because it's like there's no way if there was like a mad captain serviceman would go, "Come and meet him," because that's not what the military's like.
No. Yeah, it's so there's three of them, isn't there? There's like 3 or 4 of the sort of the army or the pilots, whatever. But I'm never entirely sure if they're sort of like Air Force or whatever, because they just seem to have some like there's someone superior to them who they refer to as a general. But I don't know if the Air Force has generals. I thought there was admirals and flight captains, whatever. But they just seem to have this sort of like, there's no sort of like, there's a captain and then everyone below him.
Yeah.
And they just seem to be like this group of friends. It's almost like the A-Team. They're just sort of this group of pilots that sort of everyone just calls in whenever they need them. Like they don't seem to do a great deal. But yeah, this is the thing. None of them are distinguishable other than their costumes to define who they are. There's a whole, and I think when we get to the 1982 version, I think a lot of this is addressed. But even let's talk about the alien as well, the thing in this, because you made a really good point that you mentioned some of that. This isn't an original film. This was directed and produced by Howard Hawks, and he purchased the rights to Who Goes There, a 1938 short story by John W. Campbell. And so like it was going to be based on this story. However, the story, and this is fascinating to me because I always find that when you read this sort of like, you go, "It's 1938," and they were writing this idea. The story is about a creature that has a definitive mass, but then can use that mass to replicate the bodies, memories, and everything of an individual. And in the story, this is what's really cool. The character names are Blair and McCready. They're all there, and they appear in 1992. It mimics the Doctor, but there's an excess of 90 pounds or 90 kilograms, 90 pounds of mass that this alien is made of. And that goes into making the dog. And so all that sort of in the 1982 version. So Campbell basically, and that's the thing, the whole story is about paranoia. It's about, you can't tell who's who. It predates that sort of like Red Scare. This is all that sort of story of like thing of the 50s. You mentioned Invasion of the Body Snatchers, was very much based on that idea of the Red Scare. So in 1938, obviously, you can probably take the Nazi idea or sort of, that sort of thing, and that's what it's written about. But then they take it and just go, it's an alien. It's a bloke in a suit.
So there's no... There's no mystery about it, and there's not a mystery in the 1982 version. There's not, but it feels like that. Yeah, I should have thought my words out more before I started talking. But it's just sort of like, it's an alien. All right, let's get cracking now. Let's do some weird stuff with like the science. Let's like do sort of like little alien things. Yeah. I tried to find the best ways to describe it. There's no tension, right? There's no
paranoia. There's no paranoia.
No, there's no paranoia. There's no tension. It's just very much sort of like, this is the story. It is presented to you. Yeah. This is exactly what's happened. Now we're a bunch of scientists examining something. It's just here, and I can't figure out whether it was scary at the time or not. And that's what I find so interesting, because I don't think it's not scary.
No, I think it's going for a level and a type of scare. And I think it goes for a type of scare similar to Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Now, Invasion of the Body Snatchers definitely goes for a paranoia sort of grab.
Invasion of the Body Snatchers, every single iteration is terrifying.
Yeah. I'm a massive fan of the 70s version, though. Yes. I really do.
Yes.
But the thing they try in this, the thing that's most interesting in this one is they sort of, firstly, the alien is vegetable matter.
Yes.
And so I was like, okay, that's interesting. And so they play that up, but then it's almost like they reverse the thing, isn't it? Oh, we eat vegetables, so here's a vegetable that eats us. It needs our blood to procreate. And there's a great part in this where you say the scientist has actually sort of taken part of it. I think sort of like it's the arm and sort of been able to do something with it to get seeds or something or other. And so he's actually growing them in his lab and feeding them plasma. Like he has blood plasma going into them. And all the scientists are like going, oh yeah, well, okay. No one's going like, are you mad? Only one person sort of says, it's the army guy says like, one of these has just killed two of our guys, and you're raising its kids. Like what are you doing?
Yeah, and you're like giving it a taste of blood, right?
Yeah, and then that's
frozen in ice. We don't know that it is interested in human blood, human flesh, or whatever. Like, and he's just like, do you know what? An experiment.
Yeah,
you don't get a dog and like feed it bits of your flesh because it's going to eat you. That got away from me, but you know what I mean.
No, because the leaps in logic, and I love this because this happens in all science fiction films, and especially in the 50s. The leaps in logic that get made, they are akin to like Batman in the 60s. Sort of like some of the riddles the Riddler would leave, and then all of a sudden, like Batman would solve it in some crazy way. It's the same here. They're like, it's vegetable matter. Really, vegetable matter? That's fascinating. No blood. Must be like our plant matter. And you go, it's from space. You haven't examined. You are literally looking at a chunk of it. And you're now describing it in akin to our vegetable matter. Our vegetable matter, plant matter, relies on the sun, carbon dioxide. So okay, I'll take your word for it. Let's move on. And then it goes, well, it attacked the dog and started to drain its blood. It must need blood to feed. And it's like, hang on, like, no, what? You haven't seen that. And like you say, then all of a sudden it goes straight to, I shall feed its seeds blood. And I'm thinking, all I can think of is Little Shop of Horrors, and going, okay, cool, it's going to break out into a dance number soon.
It made me think of a story which I love, Day of the Triffids, which is fantastic. Yes. And Little Shop of Horrors as well. It was exactly that. Less, funny songs or scary.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just like, this is very Day of the Triffids. And I meant before we chatted actually to look up when Triffids came out, but I don't know.
I think quite a bit. I don't know, actually, it might be the 50s, but it was a book, wasn't it? It was a novel to begin with.
Yeah.
What's you looking for that? But you're right about the plant matter, because the thing is, then you do get to see the alien. This bit, obviously, it's a black and white film, and so they hide it. And it is quite obviously just a bloke in a suit.
I didn't remember it being as bad as it is, and I'm quite forgiving of films from like 40s, 50s, 60s sci-fi horror films of effects and what they do. This is particularly bad.
It's particularly boring, isn't it? Like, there's very little to it.
I think I just want to talk about this film. This is so much fun. I've just laughed the whole time.
Because it's like we now live in a world where we have a character that is an alien made of plant matter in Groot. Like, it looks like a
yeah.
tree. We have Swamp Thing or Man Thing. We've seen characters that do this. And that was the whole point of this thing. Oh, it's raised from a seed. It grows from a pod or a flower. And you go, oh, wow, that's fascinating. What does it look like? It looks like a bloke with a big head. Why would it be? Why would this thing, and this is the thing, this is something Julian and I have always backed on about with things. Why would it look human? Like, make it alien, like make it different and weird and stuff.
It's what is so interesting about the alien in this film, that it isn't human, and they could have gone so different with it, but obviously I don't know if it was budget or time constraints or just lack of imagination, which I think is probably what it was. And it's like, you could have done something so interesting. It's a plant that eats people, like, or feeds off blood. Yeah, I mean, it does eat people, doesn't it? Yeah, but and I'm just like, why would you just make it look like he looks like the monster, like Frankenstein's monster, right?
Yes.
But not a good version. I'm just like, you could have even gone like Poison Ivy with it and just like covered him in, like, I don't know how they would have done. You could like covered him in vines and leaves and or something that looks like matter. You know, I wanted him to feel like stinky and dirty and messy, and that would have been terrifying.
Yeah, something. Yeah, like, why is he wearing, like, you know, a top? Like,
is he wearing a top? I don't remember that.
He's wearing an outfit. I mean, one of the things I would say is when it comes to it, one of the big set pieces of this film,
he's got like a belt on.
Yeah, they've just gone, you know, what does an alien look like? And they're going, oh, it's like this.
The man with his shirt tucked into his trousers and the belt.
Is the fact is that is the full body fire that they do.
Oh, okay, yes.
And so I do give them full props for doing that, because he breaks through a door and they basically set him on fire. And I'm like, yeah, that dude's on fire. Like, there's no messing about with that. This is before stunt guys had unions, I'm sure.
Yeah. So that's a good point. So from that sort of moment just before, when they start sort of realizing that he's alive, it's alive, the thing is alive, and they need to then basically set everything, because there's a storm, isn't there? So is he trapped somewhere? Oh my God, I can't remember now. I should have properly watched it, shouldn't I? Well, I say that, but from here, I really enjoyed it. So I'm still not saying it was great, but I enjoyed it. I sat and was like, yes, I'm on board. And set him on fire, and then they have to, you know, the thing sort of follows it, and they have to go and keep warm somewhere. I actually really enjoyed all of this bit and thought it was really well done, especially him being on fire, which makes me sound like a psychopath. But I was
it's a good effect. It's a very good effect.
And watching it, I was just like, this was made in the 50s. That is actually super impressive. That it looks like, I mean, because he was on fire, but it looks like terrifyingly like he's on fire. Like,
I don't know what the conversation must have been like, you know. So my back will be on fire, like yeah, and your front, quite possibly your face, and they're like, oh, all right, yeah. How's it going to happen? Flamethrower, just like, all right, cool.
We're literally going to set you alight.
Literally going to set you on fire. Yeah.
Oh dear. Don't know what I'm laughing about. Poor man being set on fire. But and like the set's on fire. There's a lot of fire, and it's genuinely impressive.
Yeah, because he walks through, and there's like, you know, because they stay on him for quite a little, for at least sort of like 15 to 20 seconds. And I can imagine sort of like, you know, Howard Hawks as the director going like, hold it. And it passes out, and they're like, put him out.
Do it again.
Yeah. Take two. You're right. Yeah, parts of the set are clearly on fire, so they must have just rushed in and put it all out. You wouldn't get away with that now, I don't think. I don't know. They'd CGI it probably.
Yeah, I reckon so.
But you're right. But one of the interesting things is you know, it says at the beginning of the film, sort of based on the novel, who goes there. And so in 51, I don't know how popular the short story had been. It had been in a couple of magazines, so I don't know who would know it. But with this stuff, when you watch the film, if you were like, well, this is based on a thing called Who Goes There? The answer would be me, as he basically walks around everywhere. So yeah, you're right. The ending of this story is very sort of wrapped up. There's no, the story wraps up with the newsman getting what he wanted all along. Like he literally gets to release the story to the world. And
sorry, you go.
No, go on. What were you going to say?
I don't really know what I was going to say. I was just like, he's such a random character. So one of the things, journalists, really, really popular in 1950s, 1950s films.
It was an honourable profession,
right? Absolutely, yeah, less so now.
Yeah.
And when used well in those sort of films, especially sort of when you're looking at film noir and stuff like that, wonderful storytelling, way of telling story works really well. And sort of it becomes seamless. You sort of forget that they're a journalist. It doesn't really matter in terms of the plot. In this, it is so random, although I do think it ends up having a nice end. And I'm just like, have they just included him being as a journalist for a cool ending? Is that why?
Quite possibly, because he's the one that sort of drives parts of the plot. Like he's almost like, in some cases, he's almost like the point of view character, because he's not a scientist.
That's true.
And he's not the army. So he's sort of stuck in the middle and everyone has to explain stuff to him. And also, he's the one that constantly points out how ridiculous everyone is. Because they're sort of like, at one point, because the fact is they blow up the ship, they try to sort of like melt the ice around it and they destroy the ship.
Yeah.
And then they get the body back, and obviously that thaws out and escapes. And he's the one that's like, well, there's not many people that can say they've lost the first spaceship and the first alien in a single day. So I'm like, all right, you snarky git. It's sort of like, we didn't ask you to be here in the first place.
Yeah, you just sort of turned up.
Yeah, you sort of just came along. So yeah, no, but I do like, he's very happy at the end, isn't he? When he sort of like reports from the Antarctic.
He's right pleased with himself.
He is. However, and this is something I wanted to sort of just highlight. He says at one point, because they burn it all, don't they? They burn everything. That's the thing. They make a point of they burn all the samples, all the whatever, the little plants, the big one. And then he sort of is on the radio telling all these news reporters, this is what I've seen. There's no need for evidence. Like, trust me, this is what's happened. That's how honourable a newspaper reporter is in the 50s. Like, oh, we don't make stuff up. There's an alien.
Do you know what? I didn't even clock that. But yeah, he's just basically, you can't even see him. He could be anybody.
Yeah.
Just on the radio. It's been like, right, got a story for you lads.
Yeah.
Here we go.
It's just, yeah, so that bit was like, I was a bit like, oh, right, so they're going to just take his word for it.
Yeah, I didn't even
Fair enough.
I was just like, imagine being on the other end. You'd be you'd be chilled to the bone.
Yeah.
Watch the skies.
It's a good line. I like it as an ending, and I think that the words are great. But it did feel a bit like, is he just going to get back? And they were like, oh, here he is, nutter. Hey, he must have gone crazy up there in the Antarctic.
Going to properly look up the closing lines because they are really great. Have you got them in front of you?
I haven't.
Oh no.
Because whilst you're doing that, because we're not going to talk about many women in this episode, because they're very but I did want to talk about the woman that the captain has a relationship with.
I can't even remember her name, which is terrible, isn't it?
No.
I want to say it's something like really generic.
It is, I'm sure. I'll have to have a look in a minute. But I don't know if you remember, there's a conversation, they've clearly had a bit of a relationship before the events of this story, that they've known each other. And you get sort of snippets of it. And it's basically, they got drunk together. She outdrank him. He passed out and she left a note on his chest. And he's clearly humiliated by it. And there's one point when he confronts her and she's like, oh, didn't know you had a temper? And I was like, yeah, is this supposed to be sort of like funny? or is he supposed to be intimidating? I don't know how I'm supposed to take this scene. And I'm not totally sure how the actors think they're supposed to do it either, because he's sort of like, he's a bit like, why you? But it's not quite anger, but it's still not quite humor. It's a very weird scene.
And it feels really, there doesn't need to be, as we'll see when we talk about the thing, there doesn't need to be a romance in the story or any sexual tension at all. And it's one of those weird choices where it's gone, do you know what? People love romance or people who've been in a relationship. Let's chuck that in. And you're just like, I'm like, there's already a lot going on.
Yeah, it's already busy. You don't need it.
And she's cooler than him.
Yeah,
so
I was going to say.
So why are we focusing on him? Let's have her be there.
Yeah, this is the thing. When it sort of plays out, she doesn't even become like a damsel in distress. She's just sort of there. And she doesn't contribute to the plot in a great deal. And so I was a bit like, oh, you are literally there just to be this love interest. But you've ended up being cooler than him. So you've sort of taken this role and made it your own. So there was a part of me was like, fair play, love. You've done really well with this 50s film where you've gone, do you know what? Fuck them. I'm gonna be better than all of these. Well done. I don't know if that was patronising or not, but I was just impressed.
Just impressed that, like, in this film, which is a massive sausage fest, she was like, I'm going to make it my own. I don't know why I'm here, but I've got a role and I'm going to kill it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I'm being paid. I might as well give it my all.
Yeah.
So that's the 90. I'm sure we'll go back to it, but you talk about a sausage fest. So let's talk about 1982, the thing.
Wait, well, first of all, the final lines. Oh yes, are fantastic.
Go on, give us those lines.
Oh God, I'm gonna try and act it out. I hope everybody's ready for these fantastic.
It's been recorded. This is going to go. Yeah, this is it. It's going out to the world. Tell us the story.
This is my audition for doing some audiobooks. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Watch the skies everywhere. Keep looking. Keep watching the skies. I mean, he doesn't deliver it like that at all.
No, but he should have done. Now that's the way it should have done. It should have gone.
But it is cool. Like that is cool. The ending and those final lines are very cool. I will give this film that.
And it is feeding. I mean, one of the things we should highlight is obviously this 1951. You've had
Watch the Skies.
Roswell was 46. So the UFO phenomena is sort of, I don't know, going strong, but it's definitely in the sort of the pop culture zeitgeist of and obviously sort of post World War II. So it works really well. It is a great ending line. So let's jump forward sort of like 30 years to 1982 is the thing. So firstly, like John Carpenter was going to do a remake and then decided not to. He got the rights to do it, and he loved the film, the Thing from Another World. It appears, the opening part of it appears in Halloween, but then decided to go back to the source novel and make something a lot closer to the source novel, and I'm so glad he did. Mm-hmm. And his basically sort of like, no one's traveling down, there's none of this stuff, everyone is there at this ice base, Antarctic ice base. They're there to sort of do very specific things. It's isolated. It's a very small crew. I think it's like 8, something like that. It's and they come across. No, they don't come across. They basically a dog, and I love this. The opening scene.
The opening. I love this film.
Because I want to talk about. Because I want to talk about the dog actually. Because the dog's really important. But yeah, it opens with the dog is being chased. Oh, actually, no. I want to go back even further because there's something that irritates me a little bit. You said this film has no mystery. This film and Predator does the same thing. It opens with exactly the same thing. Mm-hmm. It opens with the spaceship coming in. So Predator comes in and it fires like a pod or something to Earth. So you're like, oh, there's an alien in this film. And then it goes to like, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Cut that first bit and the whole first part of this film becomes a mystery. The opening of the thing is a spaceship crashing. Now, granted, it's like 20,000 or 30,000 years ago. But you're like, oh, there's a spaceship in this film. And so, like, when the Husky's running across the tundra or whatever, like straight away you're like, well, that's going to be linked with the spaceship. So I wish they didn't have that bit because I feel that would have added a little bit more. You said like, no, it's not really a mystery, but it would have added a little bit more to it. But it does. It has the sort of the Husky running across the tundra being shot at by the Norwegians. and then they take the dog on, and then the Norwegians come across, lands and comes across
amazing.
it.
And it's just like,
yeah, and then
yeah,
and then Gary, who is Gary, perfect name, Gary,
isn't it?
Yeah, you're such a Gary.
Such a Gary.
Shoots the Norwegian, and then they obviously have this dog, and then the dog turns out to be an alien parasite that can mimic and imitate any other living form. And they find it attacking the other dogs and trying to mimic all these other dogs, and then it attacks the others one by one. But you're never sure. You said there's no mystery, but there's no mystery as to what it is, but there's definitely like paranoia. You are never entirely sure. Right up until the end of the film, when Charles come back, you're never entirely sure who is or who isn't infected. And so I love that about this film. But one thing watching it this time I wanted to just mention, and I was curious about your thoughts on that husky, because there's things they do with it. The way it's been shot, that husky, they give it an intelligence. They have it watching it. They have the husky watching them through a window. There's one point when sort of like they're going off in different parts of the corridor, and you see the husky stood there watching, waiting for them all to separate, and then follows one of them off. And I never realized, like, Christ, they've made that dog really menacing.
That dog deserves an Oscar.
Yeah, like the way it's shot, and then it goes into one of the rooms, and you just see a silhouette of someone. You're like, oh, who was that? But someone's been taken, like, you know. But I don't know. Yeah, what are your thoughts on the opening of the thing?
I mean, I love everything about this film so much. But yeah, you know, for me, this film is evidence at how talented John Carpenter is. You know, I feel he's very much a cult director.
Yes.
And I say, you know, I know he's in, you know, everybody knows who John Carpenter is, but they know like Halloween.
If you're listening to this podcast and you don't know who John Carpenter
obviously, but you know, I'm talking about the sort of like the
general.
masses, and I feel, you know, like often his work's seen as a bit like kitsch or sort of maybe not, you know, lowbrow. You know,
his 90s output tarnished him. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and then you watch this film, and exactly what you said about the dog, it shows how clever he is he knows how to shoot something. Like, how many other directors would be down there with the dog, would be shooting the dog in a menacing way, would be like having, exactly like you said, the dog looking in the window. And one of my favorite anecdotes about this film, and I don't know if it's real, I've never looked it up because it ruins it for me if I do, and you might have seen or read the same one, which is when they've got the dog coming down the corridor, they had the trainers at the other end, and the dog was supposed to just come down to the other end, but the dog stopped and looked in a room itself, like it wasn't supposed to, so it just paused and looked in a room, and John Carpenter was like, in the can, perfect. Like, because it is genuinely terrifying. That dog is so scary.
It's built up as being really menacing.
Yeah.
And that, like you said, that moment when it walks in the corridor and just looks in the wall, like, it looks intelligent.
Yeah.
And that's what's really good. And I know that sort of obviously he's been trained to do specific things and the way it's been cut together. But you were so right about the talent of John Carpenter. But this is where I think John Carpenter, the more sparse something is, the better John Carpenter is. Like, his early career, like, I love Halloween, I love The Thing, I love Escape from New York, Assault on Precinct 13.
Assault on Precinct 13 is
like, so there's just like a run of films that are unmatched, in my opinion. Like, even Prince of Darkness I love, but that's where it starts to sort of, and then you have and I love it, Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah.
But that feels a little bit like, he's like, oh, okay, he's going into kitsch, as you said, sort of like,
he's leaning into what everybody says he is.
Yeah, exactly.
And I love Big Trouble in Little China, but it is also just like, come on, you did Halloween, Assault on Precinct 13, and The Thing. I'm not saying go outside of your wheelhouse and your talents, but
yeah, the funny thing is,
The Thing.
If you ever watch, we'll bring it back to The Thing in a second, but if you ever watch In the Mouth of Madness with Sam Neill, I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I've not, no.
Highly recommend it. It's quite hard to track down, but In the Mouth of Madness, Sam Neill's like an insurance broker, and this old author called Sutter Kane has gone missing. And so in his publishing company was like, can you find him? Because he hosts a book sort of thing. And there's all this other thing. But the people starting to go crazy, and they're all sort of like, they've all read Sutter Kane, and sort of like he tracks him down, and things start to go like, it's very Lovecraftian. Like he gets there at one point and he's on the bus and everything goes blue. And he's sort of like, he knows he's going mad. And every time he drives out of town, he drives past this one person driving the other way. And then he drives back into town. It's very sort of like, it's got these real, but it's John Carpenter doing that weird, sort of like sparse horror again. And it really works for me. Fantastic film. But that's what he's good at. And I like the fact that I say about sparse. This film is really laconic. And when I say laconic, it's sort of like, it goes at a sort of its own pace. Like you get the first sort of like 20 minutes, half an hour, probably about 20 minutes. It's just life on the base. Like you've had this incident and they're all like, well, this crazy thing happened. And then they're just sort of back to it. Like, yeah, you got your guy sort of making the food, and you've got the sort of like the scientist, the pathologist, and all these people doing their bits and pieces. And MacReady just sat in his shack drinking and playing chess.
I could write a whole thesis about MacReady and masculinity.
Toxic or otherwise?
Both.
Yeah.
But, erring on toxic.
Yes. Yeah. Well, no, definitely. Well, I think there's a lot of that goes on in this film.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm so excited to talk about it. I'm so sorry to the other film. But we're here for this.
Yeah, let's be fair.
Although the ending, fantastic, and the standing in the circle, lovely, great,
yeah.
Well done. Go watch it for those things.
But the thing is still better.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's this laconic pace, and even like, they don't rush to go to the Norwegians. There's a bit of a discussion. They're like, oh, we should really go there, and it takes a good sort of like 15 minutes before they're there, and so it's not. Like, oh my God, this has happened, let's go. And it sort of, it works at this pace. And I love the fact that all these characters actually are quite well defined. Where in the last film, they were all very generic. These are all very, like, I can't remember names per se, but like, the characters they have on that are there. And they're all fantastic actors. Like the cast are actually, only a couple of them went on to do anything much else really. Obviously, Kurt Russell and the great Keith David, who would obviously go back and work again with John Carpenter in They Live. But so that but what, let's talk about the masculinity in this then, because there's a lot of competition and testosterone kicking about in this ice thing. What are your thoughts then?
Where to start? So there's no women in this film. The computer doesn't count, by the way.
Well, yeah, in the force, what's he do when she beats him?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He gets angry and destroys her.
Yeah, calls her a cheating bitch and pours whiskey. Yeah.
So computer doesn't count, by the way, everybody. Just the best. Oh, I'm so excited. The best thing about this film is it's a perfect snapshot of the fragility of the male ego, right? So
screw you.
But I love the pacing of this film as well, and the exact scene that you talked about sets it up. Before they decide to go to the Norwegian base, they're sat there discussing it, and nobody can come to an agreement.
Yeah.
They can't decide together. They cannot work together. They don't show any compromise. They don't show any empathy.
No.
They can't do it. And they've got a weak leader.
Yeah.
Although they do follow him, which I find fascinating, especially when he turns out to be even more weaker than he is, because he starts off quite strong, right? So he comes out, shoots the Norwegians. So you see he is the man in charge. And they all defer to him as well. They all say, go, I've completely forgotten his name. Gary, thank you. Gary. Nobody cares about you, Gary. They're all like, go get Gary. And he comes out and you think he's going to be strong. When it comes to making decisions, he cannot do it. And he's weak and he's hesitant. And so then they all start to phone to MacReady that he is not a reliable leader. No. He is paranoid. He is selfish. He thinks about himself until the end, which we'll talk about. And so they've got no one to bring them together as a group, which in films is a traditional feminine role, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we see how their masculinity is getting in the way of everything that they are doing. If they, we see Macready, he purposefully isolates himself from the group. They're in fucking Antarctic, and he's in a shack.
Yeah,
and he's just in his shack. And he's a pilot. You can tell he feels a bit more superior. You can tell he feels like
he feels separate. He feels more like, what you're saying is actually fascinating, because one of the things that did strike me this time watching it, that scene where they're arguing about whether they go to the Norwegian base and things, and it struck home to me, because this film's about paranoia, is they don't like each other to begin with.
No.
Really, and we're so used to a group of friends or a group of colleagues or comrades breaking apart. That's the idea. It's sort of like the tragedy of friends breaking and turning on each other, but they're not friends in this. So there's no tragedy, because it is just sort of like them, I think Child would happily turn a gun on any one of them at any one point, and so you're right, there's this buffering of egos going on, of sort of like, who's Johnny Big Bollocks out of the group, really.
There's no family, there's no, if we were to watch a different type of film that was about this, it's exactly this. It'd be the alien comes in and splits up the family, it splits up the group, and they realize they have to work back together. Like every single like horror film convention, they have to work together to defeat the bad guy, or the or action film, whatever. It's such a big trope, we see it all the time. But here, they are not a family. They're a bunch of men who have been dumped in a place together in a research station, and they're just getting on with their jobs. They're not, apart from like a couple, you can tell they've got some friendships, but not as a cohesive whole. They are not going, they're not sort of like, how are you doing? What's going on with your job at the moment? Everything's really separate. And we know that from small cues. So we find out that they haven't heard from anybody in 3 weeks, the guy on the radio. But we only know that because somebody comes and asks. They should already know that.
Yeah.
Everybody in this group should know that they have not been in contact with anybody for
3 weeks.
But they don't, because they're all so isolated. So he just drops these little clues that the whole film is so fucking clever.
Yeah.
And like these little breadcrumbs that show that when you watch it a million times, like I have, you go, they are never going to defeat the thing. It's never going to happen. There's no setup that they will be able to. From the very beginning, they are going to fail, and yet I still find it completely compelling. And I know this turned audiences off from it. They thought it was really depressing, and didn't get on board with it. But it's the thing I love about it. It's the thing I love about it the most. That they don't win, and they're never going to win because they cannot work together.
So because you're right, because one of the things about this film is, from the get-go, you're right. This is not a heroic film.
No.
Because of Kurt Russell, but even to this point, he became the action-y sort of person following Escape from New York. So he hadn't really fallen into that slot yet. John Carpenter made him that, and then he obviously had Tango and Cash. So he hadn't had that transformation yet. So there was no real identification of like a, I don't know, even 81, I don't know, like a Clint Eastwood or something. Like if you were to put Clint Eastwood in that role, you'd be like, oh, yeah, like he'll be hard, but he's clearly going to be the hero sort of role. Well, maybe not Clint Eastwood. That's probably because he would be a bit darker. But like you'd know there'd be characters or actors that you'd be like, oh, they're close. They would only be a hero. That's the sort of like the character. But yeah, no one in this feels like they are to be the hero. Like Macready is the protagonist, but he's never really the hero. And you're right when you say about him being selfish, because one of the interesting things watching it again this time, you realise, because obviously Blair is the pathologist and the scientist. He's the one that sort of determines this thing can replicate cells and all this other stuff. And then he calculates how quick it would take over the world.
I love Blair.
Yeah. And
Blair is on it. Blair is good at his job.
So when he calculates it at 27,000 hours, which is just over 3 years. So you're like, Christ, that's quite a lot. Feels like quite a long time. But he's like, but we don't have a chance.
Yeah.
He's the one that like he goes nuts and then obviously gets put into the tool shed. But he is also the one that like when just as MacReady's leaving and they lock him in the tool shed, he's like, watch. I can't which one it says, watch so and so, the one who looks after the dogs. Watch so and so. He was left alone with the dogs. So he's stoking the paranoia. Clark. He says, watch Clark. He was alone with him for at least an hour or whatever. And so your attention automatically falls on Clark because you're like, oh, okay, well, he's the one. And what you realize is that Blair's stoking the paranoia in MacReady and in the audience. And again, you talk about how clever this is, and I love that they have like meta moments like that where you have characters feeding. It's not exposition; it's feeding that paranoia, but it's feeding the audience's paranoia as well. And it's just so well done that you do sort of like, even I've watched this a number of times, I'm still going like, yeah, is that one you or so yeah,
that's what's so good about it, because you do exactly that. And I've watched this, as you said, I've watched this film so many times, and I still sit there and I go, I feel like I need a wall chart for fun. This is a sort of shit I would do for fun, to like map it out and be like, so he was alone then, but then he had contact with that person then, and then it had that, and then this happened, and then we get to the blood scene, and obviously I know who it is now, but I still recall the first time watching that scene.
Yeah, I didn't. Even this time, I was like,
no clue, who it was, and even like you said, the first few times after I'd watched it, like next few times I watched it, was like, because it's so well done, and nobody. The performances, nobody gives anything away in lesser hands. They would do. There would be some cheesy little scene where it's obvious because it's nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
Yeah.
But this film doesn't treat you like that. This film treats you like an intelligent audience, or that like you're there in the research center with them. And I think that's what's so special about it. I think that's a reason why lots of people didn't like this film when it came out.
This film's ahead of its time. Like,
we love it now because it treats us like an intelligent, smart audience. It wants us to go along for the journey, and it wants us to feel everything that they're feeling, and it achieves that.
This is the thing, I think, with these early John Carpenters. I think John Carpenter was ahead of his time.
Absolutely. Get this film, like watch this film during the pandemic and about paranoia, and I'm like, yep, he's got it. He knows.
Even like Assault on Precinct 13, you watch that, and this idea of sort of like, war on the police or whatever you want to do, the isolationism, the isolationism and all that kind of stuff, like it's all there. And that is a great film. Even the remake of that was actually pretty good, but the original is fantastic. But the same like with I Love Escape from New York, which is 1980, and even Halloween, that idea of that sort of, again, that laconic pacing, which people sometimes count for boring and go, oh, nothing happens. But no, it's about building attention. It's about building a character so that when something does happen, you feel something, like, and I think that's what he really achieved. But yeah, right, I don't think audiences were ready for this to be so bleak. And you know how sort of directors have like thematic trilogies. Terry Gilliam has his Imagination trilogy, and John Carpenter has his Apocalypse trilogy. I don't know if you know this, because you I don't think you've seen the other two parts of it, but this Prince of Darkness and In the Mouth of Madness forms his Apocalypse trilogy, and it's basically films that are bleak. It's just films where he's gone like, there's bleakness throughout, and I'm going to challenge you to sort of to basically challenge to watch them a little bit, you know what I mean? And The Thing is a great way to start that, because it's just sort of like you're separate from society. So there's no social contract, there's no social norms. It is, like you say, just a bunch of egos trapped in this place. And then just whatever agreement. And I think, like you say, one of the things that's interesting about why they defer to Gary, because he isn't a great leader at all. Like, and you make a great point, he gets weaker. But it's almost like men, in that sense, fall into that position of this is the hierarchy we've been told exists. And so they accept it to begin with because Gary's got the badge sort of thing. And it's quite clear that that's the place, because everyone's sort of like, And you're nodding away because it's, I don't want to steal your point, but that's clearly the point, isn't it? Like, well, Gary's in charge because we've been told he's in charge until it goes pear-shaped. But yeah, so I find that all fascinating, that is just it. It's just this sort of like, it crumbles once it's challenged.
Summed it up perfectly. I couldn't put it better. Love it.
Yeah. One of the things interesting that they go to the Norwegians, because the other thing as well is you talk about Macready and him being a bit of a tosspot. He doesn't refer to him he knows they're the Norwegians, but he keeps calling them something, the Swedes, the Swiss, whatever. Like there's this sort of like dismissiveness about them, isn't there? And it's clearly sort of like, I don't know, him just being a dick.
He's so annoying. Why do I like him so much? He's such an interesting character.
Yeah.
It's like because he is such a dick, but also he ends up doing the right thing. He is about the greater good. And
is
then
he, though?
I think he is. Well, I mean, I think the ending's open to interpretation, and not just that who is infected, who's not. I think there's multiple things you can take away from the ending. I think you can take away. I think you can see the ending is quite hopeful. I think that's a personal preference. I don't think I particularly do personally, and I like it that way. Don't ruin it for me. But but we start to see more about him when he's leaving the message, and he's doing that recording, but yet he's vain about it. He stops it and listens back to see, why is he listening back? Is it to see how he sounds? Is it to see, if he's actually telling the truth? Is he a reliable narrator in this recording that he's leaving? And I think that's from the writing of the character.
Yeah.
But also it's from the performance.
What's interesting about that, actually, if you watch what he does, he makes a statement about what's going on. I can't remember entirely what he says, but it's relatively like, I'm keeping an eye on it, basically, because he's found those, or someone, the cook has found those long johns that have got the tears in them. So he mentions about that.
But she just fondles all the way through. It's just so
which
weird.
is really creepy. Like,
so
I know he's supposed
creepy.
to be like this. Clearly, they're like, be as if you're considering them, and he's almost like, like, no, don't sniff them. Don't sniff, you creep. But yeah, he's talking about those. But then what he does, he rewinds it, listens to it, and then he actually records over
it,
the ending, and actually says, I don't know what we're going to do. And so instead of saying, basically, I'm going to keep an eye on it, it's actually, no, we're fucked.
Yeah.
Like, he comes to that conclusion, like, there and then, of like, yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, there's nothing to do, Macready out kind of thing. And so he wants to leave that message, but it's not like a hope, like you say, it's not a hopeful message. It's not like a, I hope when someone finds this message, we'll sort of like, they can tell the truth of the heroics that went on here. It's basically sort of like, no, this thing happened and it was awful.
And he's almost self-soothing, right?
Well, self-medicating.
Is there actually an audience for this recording he's leaving? Who is it for? And I find that so interesting. I find it so interesting when they're doing the blood tests, and and he's being challenged, and he just shoots him in the head. Yeah,
he shoots Clark,
and he just there's no hesitation.
But he's been suspecting Clark for a while, hasn't he?
He has, but I love that there's again, in lesser hands we would see a conflict. When he does that, and there is none. There's no pausing. There's no hesitation. It's just bam, done. And that's it. And then, Childs turns around and says, so he died for nothing. You murdered him. And
well, they do the blood test, and they prove that Clark wasn't a thing.
And he's just like, it's basically like all's fair in love and war. That's how it is. Like,
exactly.
We're at war.
Yeah.
It's a casualty.
Yeah. I think his opinion very much at that point is, well, I'm still alive.
Yeah.
We're here. Like, he's not, but he made a bad call. So, and I think what's interesting was as well, actually, because you mentioned Child, and I want to mention Child because Keith David Ace is absolutely awesome. But the character of Child at several points. At one point, Gary gives up the gun, which is obviously that not even sort of figurative. Like, it's a literal giving up of leadership. He puts it down and says, "Well, you clearly don't trust me. Someone has got me in charge." Macready gets all the kit. And And it's like things like I say, people seem to defer to Macready because they all like him. It's about likability, because you're likable doesn't mean you're a particularly good leader.
Yeah.
But I like the bit that when Child goes to grab the gun and they're like, no, like, you know, we need someone with less of a temper. And Child is clearly, that character sort of like clearly got short temper. Like although he calls out, and this is the thing that I find is obviously, you know, the irony of the situation is, although he's calling out Macready for killing Clark, there's no doubt if the tables are turned, like Charles would have done exactly the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so he's a complete hypocrite in that scenario. So, and that's what I mean about these characters. Sort of like they're the two egos, aren't they? They're two sort of like the alpha males that are sort of like battling out for that control. And so obviously they're the two left at the end.
I'd love to see a version of this from Charles's point of view, because obviously we get it from Macready. He's, as you said, our protagonist. Having Charles as our protagonist, having them side by side, like watching them side by side, would just be amazing.
That would be really interesting, actually, wouldn't it? To have that as a different dynamic, especially from like 1982, sort of.
And just like him watching as a black man watching Macready, who is clearly paranoid, making all these decisions and going, should he be making these decisions? Where is my position in this group? And not
he doesn't consult anyone. Like he really sort of, he just sort of makes he makes the decisions, doesn't he? And then starts barking orders.
Yeah, and Charles, Charles, he's again another really interesting character. Like he is clearly not used to being bossed around. He's like the head mechanic, right? So he's in charge. He knows his shit. And he has a fantastic attitude of like, I am not taking anybody's shit as well. In this dynamic where he could just be quiet and back down, and he's not having it. He's like, this is where almost my moral code is, and I am not going to step back from it. And so just seeing it from his point of view, just being like, this guy is clearly a paranoid psychopath.
He's drunk. Clearly, and he's clearly
watching it all fall around him and going, if I was in charge, would this be a different outcome?
Yeah. And that's interesting, isn't it? Because the film, it never gives you that. But in that moment, if Child had got the gun before Macready, you probably would be watching that film. You'd be watching Child Child in Charge. And it would be a very different ending. But obviously, let's move on to the sort of, as it goes forward to the ending. They do start to die. The first one is there's the beardy one. I'm going to forget the names, but the beardy one. Yeah. Sorry.
It's really hot. It's so hot.
My brain is melting.
It is like mad that we've managed to talk for this amount of time. I'm sweating like you could not believe.
I've lost about a stone and a half distance. But yeah, he's fun, and I love that shot where he sort of like, they know he's been taken, and he's walking across the snow, and he turns, and his hand hasn't quite finished, and you have that horrible noise that he sort of like he makes, and then they just blow him, sort of cover him in the fire, and that's it, done. Talking about that the body burn, like you get quite a few of them in this, and some great ones. But then your man again, the chubby one. Sorry. I can't say anything, but yeah, I'm hot. But the other guy, he has a seizure, doesn't he? And he dies. And that's where you get the renowned, incredibly famous scene where they get the defibrillator out, and he just jolts him once, and he goes in to do it again, and the chest cavity, the stomach cavity, opens up like a set of teeth and bites off the doctor's arms.
Awesome.
It's just fantastic. But I love the fact that it's defending itself. They keep saying that, like the thing is a reactive, defensive creature, and so it's not attacking the doctor because it's attacking because he just electrocuted it. So he's like, "Fuck you," and so it bites his arms off. And I love that. Like Phil, it was Phil Tippett that did this. Who did the special effects? Was it Rob? It wasn't Rob Bottin, was it? It was.
Yeah, it's it's Rob Bottin.
Rob Bottin. And so like you get that wonderful thing, and then the bit, like I said, they fight. They get the flamethrower and they shoot it, and then they get them with their head pulls off to escape, and then the spider leg sprouts out the head, and the eyes come out of the neck, and it sort of like tuttles off. And you just get that moment when they all look around, I was like, hell no! no.
Yeah. You'd just be like, fuck this. Just fuck it.
Yeah, he would be.
I'm just gonna kill myself.
Yeah.
I would totally just be like, I'm done. And that's sorry, you go.
No, in that moment, in a film that's very much devoid of humor, because this is not a funny chuckles film, that moment when they do all turn around and they see that thing, and there is that like a what the fuck look on their face. Like it's funny, but you're with them going like, yeah, what the fuck is going on? Like this has gone from 0 to 60 now. So I love the fact that moment stands out because of everybody's reactions. Like it's one of those great moments caught on film.
And it's my favorite thing, tension and release. You know, that's why I love horror films, because I think the tension and release, although there are horror films I love that has no release, hello Midsommar. And you know, in the run up to it, the thing, it's so interesting you say it's defensive. It is defensive because it works in the shadows. It's not flashy. It's not a flashy creature. It's, you know, it wants to assimilate quietly and quickly.
Yes.
It doesn't want to be caught. And it's being forced into a position to reveal itself. And that happens a couple of times. It doesn't want to do that. And it's vulnerable, which is also really interesting because it's so fucking scary in the build. I'm saying fuck a lot. You know, and it's they force it to reveal itself, but they don't purposely force it to reveal itself. It's not like they've got a plan to do it. And that's why the writing's so good, because it feels like this is what would happen. Like if you get a bunch of men isolated and there's a problem, they will fight it out. They won't work together. I mean, I don't think this is true of all men, but I think, you know. No,
but you need an element of camaraderie to begin with, and there isn't that.
Yeah, if you get men like these men, this is what's going to happen. Yeah. And, you know, and every success that they have isn't necessarily through their own competence.
No, it's luck, but more than anything.
But like, I just think it's so interesting, and that's purposeful. John Carpenter has done this on purpose. He has something to say. Yeah.
Well, one of the things is interesting about this whole point, this moment that happens with the chest cavity opening up, like you've not been looking at that character. Like they purposely again have kept him so he's not in the background, as in sort of like he's not an extra, but he's not one of the key alpha males. Like he's clearly a bit of a, you know, I don't want to say a beta male, but he's lower than MacReady and Child. Like he's just a bit more like, I just want to survive. I'm not in this for leadership.
Yeah, he's a geologist, right? I just want to come and do my geology.
I just want to sort of play with rocks.
Yeah.
But like so he sort of plays. So you never suspect him. You've had Clark pointed at you. You've had.
But by this time you've had MacReady, right?
MacReady's been pointed out as a potential as well, and so you've had a couple. But he's like that. So when he has that seizure, and again because he has a seizure. You're like, well, an alien thing won't have a seizure. That's like that. What would be the point? That's bizarre. So you don't think of him. So the moment that thing opens up, is again like it's a, you know, it must be like a bloody hell. I was not expecting that. Like a proper shocking moment. And again, like I said, that building of not mystery, but like that paranoia and that thing. And then beyond that moment, that's when you're like, it could be anybody. And so it's sort of at that point it's anybody's guess, and I love that even towards the end, and it does then build up to that kills them off one by one. They start to do things, as you say. They turn on MacReady. He basically carries around sticks of dynamite threatening to blow everybody
He's got it
up.
strapped across him.
Yeah,
that's not safe, dude.
No, especially when he's carrying around like a flamethrower. He's just like,
he's such a loose cannon. I'm like, why is anybody letting you be in charge?
The three things.
Well, they're not by the end, are they?
No,
taken charge.
The three things that he carries around with him is a flamethrower, sticks of dynamite, and a bottle of whiskey.
Dude,
it's a good Saturday night, that is.
You are unstable.
That's yeah. But obviously they get the parents. So the ending is there's all this middle act of all the paranoia. You get all the different people and all the different things. Like Blair's has been locked in the shed, and they'll find stuff out there. They suspect so and so. They do the blood test, but then they go to check on Blair to do the blood test, and he's gone. He's not there. The shadow, and they find. Now I'm curious about this bit. Did he dig this hole?
I have no fucking clue about the hole. I don't think about it because I'm like, if I think about it too much, I won't love this film as much as I do.
But
how has he done that hole with like his bare hands?
I don't know. We don't know. He's got tentacles and stuff, hasn't he? So
true,
possibly.
that is true. Yeah.
But they go down this hole, and he's already starting to build. Like he's foraged from the trucks and the helicopters and stuff, and the bits and pieces, and he's building a ship. He's building like a one-person ship, and I love that, this little thing. And I'm like, that's like proper mad. That is like, this thing's been going on. Like, whilst they've been stashed away in their own little paranoid world, Thing Blair has been happily sort of like, you know, whistle while I work, building this spaceship.
And it's the misdirection, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's so clever because you're trusting in Blair. He's the scientist. He's like the medical officer guy. He's the one who figures it out. They go and put him in the shack, and he hangs up the noose. So fucking dark, you know. And
that speech, man, when he's got the noose there, he's just like, I'm ready to come back in now, MacReady. I'm better. Yeah, and you got the noose, and you got the noose hanging there, and MacReady's like, no, you're not.
As somebody who's had quite serious mental health problems, I am Blair. Not anymore, but at points in my life, I've been like, I feel you, Blair.
Yeah.
But also, you have to think, when was he Thing Blair? You know, how much? When does the act
what
start?
took him?
When? At what time does it start? Is it some point in the shack? Is it beforehand? So if it's beforehand, he's playing a part.
Yeah.
There. And it's so like, and I love that, and I love that you think about it. Like I said, I've seen this film so many times, and I think about it, and I think about
there's
it.
A really good. They make a really creepy point at one point when they talk about the doctor. It's not the doctor. It's one of the other guys. Actually says, it's a single cell or a single part of this is enough to take over somebody. So we really should prepare our own meals and eat from cans. And so, like you're saying, like, you know, they've been up, like, you don't know what's been going on as to who got to how much. Like, you know, it could be one of the dogs. We don't know that we actually got away, because when they get to the dogs, some of them scarper out, don't they? Obviously, Blair comes and kills the dogs later, but like, you don't know, one of them didn't get him then or whatever. So, yeah, it could have happened at any point. So I love that's part of this paranoia. This is part of the mystery.
We also love he's just like, fuck it, I'm making myself a shit. See you later.
Yeah. But he does then attack them, and they sort of defeat him and do the burn, and they're like, no, now we've got to kill it. Like, and the only way to do it is burn it all down.
Blow it up like my laundry pile.
Yeah.
Just burn it down.
I love the fact that, like, I was trying to figure out, like, this is what you're saying about loose cannon, because there's a part of me going like, yeah, burn it all down, and then I'm like, no, that's the dumbest idea ever. Like, isolate, you know. You said about coming through COVID, you know, having to do regular testing and stuff. You'd be like, okay, right, we're all doing the same test again. We're all in the room. Let's do the test. Do whatever, right? Right, we're not it. So it's still out there. Right, we stay together as a group as much as possible, and then we hunt it down and burn it. And if we sacrifice part of the building, fine. But then every day we have to do a blood test. You're used to it now, you know, do your testing, quarantine. But their response, again, is typically male, isn't it? It's no common sense. It's just sort of like, you know, burn it.
It's exactly like there's no working together. Exactly what a clever approach to this problem.
Yeah.
And they're like, no.
Yeah.
Blow it up.
Well, you get the feeling that if they had certain characters if certain characters had survived, you may at least have that. If like the Doctor, maybe even Blair, or even Gary may have had a more. No,
Gary's useless.
Yeah, right. Yeah, fair point.
Gary would have made it worse.
Yeah, he just sat moping in the corner. But yeah, you think that you get the feeling that there's other characters that may have given a more reasonable approach, you know. And what you're left with is a mechanic and a pilot who basically is going like, you know, the people that are left, and this sounds awful, but it whittles down to the cook, the mechanic, and the pilot. That's very specific skill sets. And they're not for want of a better phrase, not there. They didn't go into those because they wanted to be huge intellects. You know what I mean? They're sort of, which sounds really patronizing, but that's, like you said, they're not there to make strategic decisions. They make very quick decisions in the sense of if this gets out into the world, then we've got to save the world. And
like if I'm flying along in a helicopter and MacReady is flying it and there's a problem, that's what I want him to do.
Yeah,
that's what he is trained to do. He has a very specific set of skills, and I want him to save my life in a helicopter. Perfect. Charles, I need an engineer to do something because this thing is broken. If it's not fixed, we will all die of lack of oxygen. I need you to do that. Engineers, you are excellent.
Yes.
Engineer away. Making strategic decisions about how we find and kill an alien that could be anybody at any point. You are not my people for that. Yeah,
it's a bit like, can I see your resumes? You're not really suited for this job.
You sit in a shack by yourself drinking all day long.
Yeah,
I'm not sure I want you to be in charge.
No, you get pissy at a female chess machine. Let's not put you in charge. But this is the thing, and this comes to this. One of these things it made me curious actually watching this version, because I was thinking this, like, this time watching this, because before you can get sort of whipped up into this sort of like the protagonist as the hero. You have that thing of like, well, of course he's the hero because he's the protagonist. It's not always the case, because there are other characters, and I now think of MacReady in the same vein as, maybe not as much, but like there are other characters that you go, you're not supposed to like them. Like Rorschach from Watchmen being the ultimate, where everyone goes, oh, he's really cool. You go, yeah, but you're not supposed to like him.
People misunderstand Rorschach. He's a very, very bad person.
Yeah, exactly. And sort of, I think with MacReady, it's that thing of like, Kurt Russell, he's cool. And I love Kurt Russell, he's amazing. But it's that thing of going like, the decisions that MacReady makes aren't, they're made under pressure and all sort of stuff. They're not the best decisions. Like there would have been a different scenario in this. But people, like you said, though, he makes that grand sacrifice for the greater good. But does he?
I love the ending so much.
Yeah.
I love it. So, do you like to look at it as a hopeful ending?
No.
Oh, come on. So, at the end, we see the walls of distrust start to break down between MacReady and Charles. You don't see that. You don't think, oh, they've realised that their toxic masculinity is bad and now they've got to work together. You don't see that? You don't see that hope?
No, not at all. Do you?
No.
Not
at all.
I have heard that, though.
I think it's lovely that people think that, but I want to watch this film and be depressed.
Yeah,
I want to be scared.
Yeah.
I want to be tense, and I want to be depressed. That's what I want from this film, and it delivers all those things.
I did go online and have a look because I was curious because there was one thing I was like, is Child the thing? Like that's, and there's obviously people that say, well, because of this and this, he clearly is, and others say, well, because of this he isn't, and even John Carpenter's like,
yeah,
I don't know, and I couldn't tell you. Like it's for you to make up your own mind, and I love that.
Was MacReady, and that's why he drinks and shares it to infect him.
That's exactly it. So there's that thing as well, because we've heard that thing, as I just said, about sharing the food, where
the little nuggets that I love.
And so but there's that moment at the end, because then MacReady says that one of his last lines is, they said, well, what? Because Charles is like, well, what are we going to do now? He says, oh, we could just sit here and see what happens. And so there's a part of me getting, that's exactly it. I'm like, oh, fuck. Like,
MacReady wants to see the world burn.
Yeah.
Somebody has hurt that man.
Yes.
He is not dealing with it.
No. Well, him and Jim Beam are dealing with it. But yeah, that's the point, is that ending is, there's no arc.
Nope.
There's
no character arc. I love it.
No, there's nothing at the end where they're like, this is the noble sacrifice. They sort of get to that point of like, we can't let it get out of here, because I think we have a natural inbuilt survival instinct for the greater good anyway. And I think the majority of people would do that. At least I'd hope to think so. But like, even the end, like they blow it up, and then there's this MacReady and Charles, and there is that thing of like, if a helicopter arrived in that moment, do I think either of them would be like, no, we can't go? Or would they both be like, woohoo, scramble on board?
Yep, exactly. Or the alternative, which is they say that they think the thing is going back into hibernation.
Yes.
So do they want to be there and freeze and their bodies be found?
Yes.
And defrost somewhere that's less isolated so they can infect things. Like, it's so good.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, it's such a downbeat ending. Like, there's no resolution. Yeah, there's no resolution.
Make me sad.
Yeah. But you say about that, it's just that tension that you left with at the end, because there would have been, and I'm sure they got notes for this, if it wasn't a big film, like it went under the radar a little bit with the studios and all that kind of stuff. But if this was a big film now, if this was coming out, there would have been a note that says, oh no, we need MacReady to be the hero. So you've got to answer all those questions. You know, he's either got to kill Childs in a sort of like Childs has got to reveal himself in that last minute, and he's got to flamethrower him or something. And then, you know, at the end of Predator, just be stood there in the nuclear dust to be saved, you know, a helicopter sort of coming down as he stands there with his hands on his hips sort of thing. Like that would be the note, wouldn't it? Like, we've got to have that resolution. But I love the fact that the thought for this one is, no, that we're going to leave you with this thought that you don't know what happened. They may have frozen, as you say, frozen and be found later and then thawed out, and the infection starts all over again somewhere else. But we don't want a sequel. I don't need a sequel. Didn't need a prequel either. But but yeah, I mean, you're right. The ending is fantastic. It's so well done, and it's ambiguous. And I love the fact the ambiguity is there. Do you think though? I was watching it, and I've been thinking about this recently because of my scorings that I use on different platforms. You know, like 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10, those sort of things. And people bandy that stuff around at the time. And I'm always like, is there a 5 out of 5 film? Is there a film that's just perfect? But then I was thinking, should it be perfect for me? And I think that's the difference, isn't it? And that's the sort of thing. The example being, the only film I've given 5 out of 5 for this year has been Everything Everywhere All at Once, because it's fucking phenomenal, that film. It made me laugh, it made me thrill, it made me cry. Brilliant film. But watching this again, I was like, this film is so packed, so tense, and so fucking dark. I almost think this is a 5 out of 5 film. I don't know, what are your thoughts? I'm just
nodding, which isn't great podcast content. Yeah. Well, so scoring, I also have an issue with. So my other half, Kevin, and I used to do Letterboxd religiously.
That's what I use.
Yeah, but we just don't do it now because life, toddler, don't really watch things that much anymore. But we also always used to have this debate that sort of, you know, a 2.5 star film isn't a bad film. It just means you went and enjoyed it, and that was it. Yeah. Whereas a 5-star film is something for us that like completely blew us away. So, you know, films like Moonlight, you know, 5 out of 5 film. Mm-hmm. That film is amazing. I always say I want to give The Room 5 stars, but Kevin doesn't let me. That film's amazing. I've watched it so many times. It's the film I've watched most at the cinema. Yeah. That's who I am as a person. And this for me is a 5 out of 5. Mm. But I don't really care about other people's ratings. But in terms of what I feel this film sets out to achieve and what it does, I think it exceeds expectations. Nothing will ever beat the first. You know, I can't remember a lot of stuff. I'm nearly 40. A lot of shit's happened to my life. A lot of things fall out of my head, like trying to live in the here and now. But I still remember the first time watching this film. Like with absolute clarity, I remember it. And I remember being just not knowing how I felt at the end. Because I was like, I don't know what I have watched. I don't know what this film is. And then I watch this film regularly. I watch it probably every year, maybe. And I still find new things or interesting things, or, you know, or I even feel the same things, but still enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's why it works so well. I just think it's a film that hasn't, so there's been so many other things that, like, you know, been remade, there's been homages to it. X-Files do one, for example. A very good one, but it's not this. Nothing lives up to it. And this film is not flashy, it's not. I mean, I do think it is out to shock and scare, but not in a gaudy way. And I just think this film is an unusual film. That so Kevin didn't watch it until fairly recently, and he was like, I know everything about the film, and he's had the same problem with other horror films that I've shown him, and so for he felt the same about Alien. He was like, I just know everything, so it ruins it for me. But he was like, but I understand why this for you is the film, because he was like, I get it. He just didn't feel it, and I think that's why this film is so good, because he had never seen it before until like 5 years ago, and he knew everything from it.
Yeah, it's best if you go into this film dark, like you don't know anything. I definitely agree. I was just on a lot though, and I totally agree with everything you've just said, by the way. This idea of how to measure a film, and it's your personal thing. And this idea of the first time you see a film and it just sort of sinks in and it just sort of hits you, it hits that spot where you're just sort of like, I've had a moment. Like watching this film is a moment in my life, which is why people like, you and I sort of like, there are films, we are film buffs or we're film lovers, because there are films we've watched, we've gone, this is a moment. Like I will remember this moment in the future. But 1982, this film came out in 1982.
The year I was born.
Was it? Year after. I was born December 81, so I'm just a bit shy.
Oh, you're so young. You're so... Oh, no, 81. Ha-ha.
81.
Me. Ha-ha.
Yes, yeah. Thanks a lot for that. But 82 is a real sort of like one of those oddly pivotal years. Because, you had The Thing, which has now become renowned as a classic. Blade Runner comes out in 82. And another one that was sort of like derided and did poorly at the time and is now regarded by almost everyone that sees it as a sort of a classic science fiction film. In fact,
I mean, are you talking about Grease 2?
No. We can do if you want. I haven't seen it since.
Go listen to my Femme on Film episode.
I will do. It's one of the ones I didn't listen to it because I've never liked. I don't like Grease for a start. I
don't like Grease.
I can't stand the first one, so I was a bit like, yeah.
No, I'm not a fan of Grease. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, that's fine. No, it's something. But also in 82, you get sort of like there's a transition to other things. It's an interesting year because you also get Rambo: First Blood, Part 1, and Arnie hits his stride with Conan the Barbarian. So it's a real transition into the 80s, and you can see that like both Conan and Rambo did exceedingly well in 82, and The Thing and Blade Runner didn't do well at all. And so you can see there's a real shift in cinema and what people wanted at that time, but also this new wave of directors coming through, like Ridley Scott making Blade Runner off the back of Alien and John Carpenter coming through. You got young Spielberg coming through. I think E.T.'s 82 as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so E.T. came out at the same time as The Thing, didn't it? And,
yes.
Was the friendly alien.
Yes.
The Thing was not.
And so, 82 is this really interesting year where sort of like you can see where people's attention and people sort of like desire is with these blockbustery kind of films. And then these films that weren't, but like when you look at like when you re-examine them now, like this film could be made today.
Yeah, 100%. They would butcher it today.
They'd
have too much money, too much, too many visual effects instead of practical effects.
Oh god, yeah.
They'd have to have a happy ending.
Yes, just go watch The Thing 2011. It's flipping awful.
It's so awful. Do you know, I was so excited because I was like, oh, they're doing the thing with a woman. How exciting!
Yeah. And I love Mary Elizabeth Winstead. She's ace.
She's fantastic. I was like, they're gonna really hold to the core of the original. No,
they really didn't.
No.
But yeah, so it's interesting how this this film does stand up, and you can watch it today. And if you've never seen it before, you've listened to this, we've spoiled the crap out of it, to be perfectly honest. But seriously, go and watch it. Like, there's some really good versions of this, like as in the Blu-ray. There's at least 2 Blu-ray transfers out there. There's a standard one. Arrow did a version which is really good. There's a 4K version out there which apparently looks amazing. If you're into that kind of thing. But I can imagine like this snow and the crystal clarity of some of the vistas in this film would look amazing in 4K.
And this film is beautiful to look at as well.
Yeah.
Even the gore and the body horror, you know. So I recently watched Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Man's Chest, which I do not like. But you know, you have the squid face man, octopus face man, and I could just watch that. I could just watch his face for 2 hours. I could watch the practical effects of the gross thing from this film for 2 hours.
That's a side note, but like Davy Jones from the podcast, that is probably some of the best CGI ever done.
It's actually perfect.
I think it's like 2006, and it's sort of like the best CGI ever done. It's barely been, and I don't know how they did it, but it's phenomenal. Especially considering some of the cack that gets put out on screen nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right about this. And one of the things I would say just about the visuals, just as a final note, you're right, because it's a very, very good looking film. And about Carpenter, he has this fantastic way of giving you the clean view of all the snow. And often what he will do is he will put those images up. So you'll have like the clean views of the snow, and then all of a sudden it'll be inside, and it'll be claustrophobic, and it'll be brown and grey and look, you know, sort of cluttered and dirty. And so you constantly get this thing of like this wonderfully beautiful but incredibly dangerous Arctic vista, and then this tight packed container that these guys live in. And it really hammers home a bit the claustrophobia as well, about how tight this thing is. Which is also, I think, a great sort of thing about building an environment, of how small and tight and close this thing is. So it's a fantastically well-made film.
It's so you just summed it up perfectly, and I love that it works with what it has.
Yes,
to bring you into it. That's a terrible sentence, but I think you know what I mean. But at the same time, he's not afraid. So my favorite thing about Studio Ghibli films, yes, we are talking about John Carpenter's thing, and I'm talking about Studio Ghibli, and the same thing is, and I've talked about this with you, I've talked about it with people I talk about all the time, is they are not afraid to hold a shot. They're not afraid to show you a vista and let you sit there and take it in. And it's exactly what you've just said. When he's outside, he will hold that shot just a beat too long. And then so then when you go inside, it is so claustrophobic, because you've been allowed to sit with it just for a little bit too long, so that you almost relax, or you're at least taking it in. And then all of a sudden it's like, bam, no, you're back in. Everybody's paranoid. Everybody's crazy. You're shit scared.
Yes.
Or even before the thing comes along, you start to get a sense of the space, because he's showing you the different characters in these small spaces. It doesn't look that small from the outside. He shows you the whole research station, holds it for a bit too long, and then brings you into the space. It's just perfect.
It is. It's phenomenally well done. Anyway, we shall draw to a close.
Yeah,
any final thoughts on The Thing from Another World or The Thing 1982?
I'm sorry, The Thing from Another World. Maybe I'll go back and watch you properly. I feel bad, but you've just got nothing compared to this.
I think you're right. I agree with that. I think it's fair. There's this is that thing about remakes, isn't it? I'll throw this in. I don't know why they remake good films. Yeah. Remake crappy films, or remake films that no one knows about and make them well. The Thing from Another World became The Thing. The Fly, although I do like the Vincent Price one, but the Jeff Goldblum one by David Cronenberg is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And so there's that. That's what I'm saying. So it was fine. It's a 50s B movie, monster movie, does its thing, but The Thing is so much better, and it says so much more. And I think that's why it's still talked about today. Absolutely beautiful. Anyway, any final thoughts? Sorry, I completely crowded your last thought then.
No, I think you've had some lovely final thoughts, and if we have any more thoughts, we'll just be here for another hour. So
yes, that's true. We haven't talked about the score, which wasn't John Carpenter. But
the score is just
Ennio Morricone, but I'm not going to go because we will go on. It's very good.
Yeah, it's really hot.
It is.
We need to go.
I need to go drink a gallon of something. Anyway, Ria, it's been wonderful having you on. I always love our conversations. It's always great fun. And you will be back before the end of the year, because you've got more Mike. You've got a bit more Mike.
And this is a link to Mike Flanagan. So at the end of oh my God, why is it completely midnight mass?
Mm.
You know, they burn up the whole island to save the rest of the world.
Yes.
And in the thing,
it's very true.
I will make tenuous links to Mike Flanagan and Studio Ghibli and everything we talk about.
But yes, we're going to be talking about The Fall of the House of Usher.
Yes, which I'm going to read before I watch it, and then we talk about it.
I have it on the shelf just over there somewhere. You can see my fingers pointing, and we will be talking about it because I will be doing it for story time.
Tony Farina.
Yeah, Big Bad Tone's coming on. He's a legend. Anyway, where can people find you and where can people hear you?
Yes, find me at Ria Carrigan on Twitter and Instagram, or at Fem on Film Pod. Listen to me in Comics in Motion for Fem on Film, or with Indie Comic Spotlights with the lovely Tony that we just talked about. I'm also doing some Disney stuff with Spider Dan, Jenna and Chit Chat Mike, and the wonderful Megan. And of course, I'm a pop gorilla. But go and listen to our Mike Flanagan stuff because it's still possibly one of my favourite conversations I've had. It was
really good fun. That was. Thank you. Anyway, there'll be contact links down below for each of those things, so go check those out. But as for Ria, thank you very much for joining us. It's been great fun.
Thank you. Oh, and go listen to us talk about Ms. Marvel because
yes, go check out the Ms. Marvel podcast because that was excellent, and it will probably be followed very soon by a She-Hulk one, and I did the Moon Knight one for Comic in Motion, so we've all been on there doing our Disney Plus piece. But if you enjoyed this podcast and you want to support us, go leave a review. As we've said, it's about what's a perfect podcast. 5 stars, exactly. 20th Century Geek. There you go. And if you really enjoy what we're doing and you want to support us further, we have a Patreon. Go check us. There's a link down below. Patreon.com/20CG Media, and we do all kinds of things on there. We do lots of other podcasts. 30-minute thoughts. I do Trekking Through the Twilight Zone with my good friend Julian Darius, and other bits and pieces. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, it's been fantastic talking to you, and Ria, it's been great talking with you once again. We shall do this again soon. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, I shall see you on the next episode.